To our first topic now, Nigeria and other developing countries are currently facing complex challenges due to weaker growth prospects, limited fiscal space, and higher refinancing risk due to shorter maturity public debt. Against this backdrop, the International Monetary Fund has warned that increasing level of domestic government borrowing from the banks in Nigeria and other emerging markets could threaten the country's financial stability. According to the IMF, the large holdings of sovereign debt could expose banks to losses if government finances come under pressure and the market value of government debt declines, which would force banks, especially those with less capital, to reduce their lending to companies and households, weighing on economic activities. To do this, and of course some other burning economic issues, to understand it better and put it into proper perspective, I have joining me live from our Abuja studios. He's a professor of accounting from Now University of Abuja, Professor Ofili Ogodioha. Good afternoon, Prof, and thank you for your time on the show.
Hello, how are you? Good afternoon.
Yes, Prof, let's understand IMF in recent times. In 2-3 days, we've had lots of reports from the IMF, but this is focused on domestic borrowing. What is your reaction to this, and what does it mean for a country like Nigeria?
Tolu, please, you have to come again because the microphone was off.
All right, Prof, can you hear me now?
They fixed it back just now.
Can you hear me now, Prof?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. IMF is talking about increased domestic borrowing. What does it mean for a country like Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for bringing me here. This is, again, a topical issue, particularly in the Nigerian economy. Like I said the other day when we were discussing about IMF instruction and input in Nigerian economy, I said that day that IMF input in any economy is advisory. Sometimes they advise you what is good and you take it. Sometimes they advise you what is not applicable, you don't take it. This very advice and warning they are issuing to nations, inclusive Nigeria, is very good and timely, in the sense that many countries, particularly the emerging market, emerging countries, are already going beyond the threshold in borrowing. And Nigeria is one of the countries that falls a victim to that. So it is now left for Nigerian nation to take such advice and work with it. Because if you look at our debt servicing, you see that it's going up around 98% of our earnings. So how do we maintain this? It is a sickness, a very serious sickness. Before we were having a symptom. It has grown from symptom to sickness now in this country. Because it's now a sickness because we can no longer carry out the legitimate functions of the government because of debt servicing. However, there are things that World Bank said that may not apply in Nigeria, particularly the warning on the borrowing from banks and weighing down the bank's ability to perform optimally. Where that may not occur in Nigerian case because Nigerian government does not borrow from banks. They don't borrow from commercial banks and they don't borrow from banks actually. They borrow through bonds, they borrow through treasury bill, they borrow through the other one called Usuk fund, and so on and so forth. But one thing I want Nigerians to understand is that this borrowing means that the government is borrowing from the general public. That's the essence of issuing government bond. That they don't have money to run the government, they now issue bond to you and me and to the general public and to even a child born today that whose father can buy bond in his name just to scoop out money to be able to run the government. It's a very bad sign because we are very sick, economically sick, up to the extent that they cannot run the government. But very pathetic in the sense that the government projected revenue for the year is supposed to be 10.7 trillion. Then the recurrent expenses for the year is supposed to be around 6 point something trillion. And of course, the capital expenditure for the year is supposed to be around also 5.96 or 5.96 or thereabout, which is around 6 trillion. The meaning is that out of 17 trillion budget we have, the government consumes everything through the cost of running the government, that is the cost of administering the government. Then they borrow 6 trillion, which is the budget deficit, because the budget deficit for the year is 6 trillion. That 6 trillion is actually what is being borrowed. So if our budget is 17.1 trillion and we are to borrow 6 trillion, and that very 6 trillion we are borrowing is actually what we have budgeted for capital expenditure. And knowing well that capital expenditure is what touches the general public. Capital expenditure is what is used for electricity, what is used for road, for railway, for aviation, for hospital, and for school. So the meaning is that the whole money to be generated or in the budget this year, which is around 17.1 trillion, will be consumed. Then the 6 trillion, which is now deficit, will be borrowed. And that one that is borrowed is now what is left for us as capital expenditure. And that capital expenditure is what I explained, that is what is used in running the government. So why should the government consume everything they project for the year and now leave a pantry 5-6 trillion for capital? And that 5-6 trillion is actually borrowed. If you look at this analysis, that out of 17 trillion we have, the government spends 11 trillion on themselves. Then there's nothing left. What is now left is to go and borrow 6 trillion. And they are telling you now they are borrowing it for project. So which means you have consumed everything on yourself. And this is why I argue with them that the budget analysis is always faulty. They tell us that recurrent expenses is around 40%, which is a lie. Well, sorry, it may not be a lie, but the way they presented it may not be good to us. Because you say recurrent non-debt, 40%. What about the other recurrent? If you put the other recurrent, which is debt and every other thing put together, which is recurrent expenses for the year, you will see that you are heading to 70 or more %. And if you are heading to 70 or 75%, means that you consume 70% on yourself. That is recurrent expenses. That's cost of running the government. You consume 70, 75% of on yourself, then you leave 20, 25% to run, or 20, 30% to run the nation. Can that work?
Prof, let me follow up.
And my own advice to government is that if you have to borrow,
okay, make your point.
If
make
you
your point.
have to borrow,
okay,
it has to be strictly on certain things that cannot be contained on the budget.
Exactly.
Or on certain things that you know that it is critical, but you have spent everything you have in the budget, then that one must be run. Not to go and consume everything in the budget into recurrent, and now you go and borrow exactly the same amount you borrow, exactly the same amount you borrow is exactly the same amount you give out to the public for capital expenses. It is wrong.
All right, Prof, allow me to
There's
interject.
something wrong
Now,
here,
Prof, if you can hear me, Prof, allow me to interject. Yeah, of course,
I can hear you.
We don't expect anything less. We are talking to a professor of accounting, so we know that, yes, we're expecting this. And thank you so much, Prof, for making that clarity and letting us understand what that means. But I want to ask you, staying with thresholds and all of these figures, the average ratio of public debt and all of this to gross domestic product, or even to our population figure, is what many always also like to analyze. Now, what does this mean now specifically to the fiscal health or financial stability of a country like Nigeria?
Yeah. Please, can you redirect the question again?
Yes. What does all of the debts and, comparing it to our growth figures, our GDP figures, if we put all of this side by side, what impact does this have on our financial stability as a country? Do we remain stable?
Yeah. Tolu, we are not stable. We are having problem. We are sick financially. I told you that Nigeria spends 98% of its earned revenue on servicing debt. And if you spend 90-something% of your revenue on servicing debt, what is then left? If you, by last year's analysis, you are spending 98% on servicing debt, and you still go ahead to borrow this year, which means by this year you will be spending 100% of your earning on servicing debt. So what will you now use to deliver the socio-economic activities in the country that you have taken an oath to administer? So we are financially sick, we are economically sick, and we seem not to have understood that we are sick. And if somebody is having problem and he doesn't understand that he has problem, that problem will continue until it consumes the person. And that is where we are going now as a nation. I always warn, not only this administration, even the other ones, that you should make sure that your recurrent expenses is lower than your capital expenses. Because the recurrent expenditure in a budget is the cost of running the government. It's very plain like this. And I was saying, in one of my speeches I delivered in one of the national conference, that the day an average Nigerian will know and understand the meaning of recurrent expenses and the meaning of capital expenses, and the day they will understand that the capital expenses is the only one that touches them, that the recurrent expenses is consumed by the government, Nigerians will continue to put pressure on government until government changes it. But how many people understand this? But I know that the people we are talking to, those people in government know. But instead of taking this advice to adjust and now use the conference papers, seminar, symposium, and the communique from all these things that come out from different fora, to use it to work and adjust their problems and adjust their spending, adjust the administrative lapses. Instead of that, when you say like this, they may not even collect the paper when you send it. And even when they get it, they will do nothing with it. So how do we move ahead? Because sometimes it's difficult for somebody to criticize himself. It's natural. But if you are a good administrator and get criticism from somebody, you should use it to adjust yourself. Even at the family setting, if you are the boss, and maybe your children or your wife tells you this thing is not good, this thing you are doing is not good, and you still continue doing it because you feel you are the boss, you will be getting things wrong, and everybody will be laughing at you in the end. Because those who are close to you, or those who could tell you the truth, have told you, and you refuse to take it. So that is what is happening to the country now. All right, Prof, allow me to ask you, because time is already fast spent. And the final question here now, Prof, we've seen tightening of monetary policies globally. Of course, higher interest rates are everywhere. And of course, and another one is weaker currency, which is happening to us here. What does that mean also to investors as we expect them to come in, moving on in 2022? Yeah. Let me come in again. You know, we always say we need foreign investors to come in. Actually, we need foreign investors. And we also need our local investors. Only foreign investors cannot save us. But the problem we have is that either is a foreign investor or local investor, investment in Nigeria is very difficult. For an investor to come into a country or into a state or into a local government to invest, it has to do investment analysis, which involves feasibility study of that business is going to do, the business plan, and business forecast. And all these things, you have to forecast the risk that is involved in the business. If we take the risk first, if you are not a Nigerian, and you are told to come and invest in Nigeria, what you would think first is, if you invest, will your investment be safe? Will terrorists not come and chase you away from your investment? Will armed robbers not come, both day and night, and pick you up or kill you in your workplace? Will you get enough? Then after the security issue, then you come to other environmental issues. Do you have power? How do you generate power if government doesn't give you power? Okay, in Nigeria, 95% of power generated in the industries and household are personal use of generator or inverter or whatever. Some foreign investors will not like to do this, because where they are coming from, government give light, and you pay for the light. You pay for the power for your companies or organizations. By the time you start generating this thing by yourself, the cost of production, which is the main thing from where you get your profit, the cost of production will be too high. And you produce it here in Nigeria, you may not be able to sell it in international market. And even to sell it in Nigeria, it will be difficult, because goods imported into Nigeria will be cheaper than yours. So that's the issue of investment. Then on the issue of our currency has gotten to the worst situation in the history of Nigeria. It has gotten to unsustainable stage, whereby you look at what happened around 7 years ago, or even, yes, say 7 years ago, that you're exchanging dollars for maybe 175, or maximum fluctuation 180, but today you are talking about 580. So if you are to establish in Nigeria, and some of the things you use may come from outside, you have to import. some of those components that are not here. And for you to import, the foreign exchange fluctuation has eroded your profit level. You may not make anything. And again, for us to make sure that the pressure on foreign exchange goes down, we have to produce. Because if you are producing massively here, people will buy our product instead of demanding from outside. As of today, 95% of what we consume in Nigeria come from abroad. And that is what is putting pressure on foreign exchange. And in this case, the demand-supply axis or forces, demand-supply forces apply. That the demand for foreign exchange is too high because we need to buy goods from outside because we don't have such goods. So 95% of what we need come from outside. Therefore, 95% of what we use in trading activities will be sourced through foreign exchange. Therefore, the cost of the foreign exchange continues going. Continues going high and high.
Yes,
until
Prof.
we start producing to drive down the demand for foreign exchange.
All right. All right.
So,
that's much.
Our problem continue to trigger from one arm to another.
Professor Aofili Ogodeoha, I must thank you so much, Professor of Accounting, now University of Abuja, for helping us understand all of this and even advising government on what should be done to address some of these issues. Thank you so much, and do enjoy the rest of your day. I really appreciate this.
Okay.
All right.